Funding for this program is provided by the National Institute of Justice.
Function in 19 years in Texas Department of Corrections.
Hello, I'm James Wilson. For years, citizens wanted the police to patrol their neighborhoods on foot. And for years, police chiefs resisted their requests. Citizens argued foot patrols would reduce crime. Police chiefs disagreed. They claimed to catch a criminal, the cop had to be in a patrol car. Today, we know that both citizens and police chiefs are right. Neighborhoods that get foot patrols don't experience any big reductions in crime, but citizens in those neighborhoods do feel safer.
Right there, not the one with the green roof, the one in front of it there? That's it there.
The effective foot patrol was the subject of an experiment here in Newark, New Jersey, conducted jointly by City Police and the Police Foundation. Here's how it worked. Foot patrol was randomly assigned to specific neighborhoods and withdrawn from others. For 1 year, officers kept track of what happened on their beats. Researchers interviewed citizens about their neighborhoods. How safe did they feel in their homes and on the streets? Had they ever been attacked? How helpful were the police? Official reports of crimes and arrests were analyzed. The results of the experiment, there was no reduction in crime. But in neighborhoods where officers were assigned to foot patrol, citizens felt safer. And citizens served by foot patrol officers had a higher opinion of police than those living in neighborhoods without foot patrol.
And you're not just like another police officer, you're their friend. No, you become their friend. They trust you, like Pat. The manager of the Paramount. They get to know you, they trust you.
I think that when the perpetrators that are out here mugging people, once they see a policeman in uniform, they think twice about it.
If they weren't down here, believe me, people wouldn't shop down here.
If a person feels safe, they are safe. And basically that's what foot patrol does. People can see a police officer on the street, they see his presence, so therefore they feel that the criminal's not going to do anything while the police officer's around. So if you feel safe, you are safe.
One city that's taken these lessons to heart is Boston. In 1983, responding to mounting citizen concerns about neighborhood safety, the Boston Police Department assigned 200 officers, 1/5 of their force, to walking beats. Prior to that time, there were virtually no foot patrol officers in Boston neighborhoods.
Back in the early 70s, the police departments all over the country were going through a phase of high mobility response to calls for service, and there were very few walking posts. Police officers were sometimes given walking posts as punishment duty, or in the event that there was an overflow of manpower, they would put some men walking, and it was more or less 8 hours of goof off, because there was no accountability for those walking posts. Those days have changed. Most of the officers that are permanently assigned to walking beats enjoy what they're doing.
Yeah, I think that the foot patrol concept is very important. It improves the public relations, certainly. It can't do us any harm there. And hopefully we are effective. So I think that we have gotten a little bit closer, and we do know each other better now. And we're not just people riding by in a cruiser, faceless and nameless.
Officer Carl Elledge has been walking these same streets for over a year, rain or shine, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. Citizens in neighborhoods with a regularly assigned foot patrol officer say the increased police visibility has made a big difference in their lives.
That physical presence, as opposed to a patrol car that may be coming through periodically, gives an advantage to the neighborhood that you can't gain otherwise.
I feel strange walking down the streets. Nothing happening. You don't see prostitutes anymore. You don't see people walking and looking in doorways anymore. You don't see people walking and looking in cars. I just think they know he's around.
Not everybody is as enthusiastic about their city's foot patrol force. Among the complaints, There still are not enough officers regularly walking the streets, and foot patrol is not a high enough priority with the police department.
We have a foot patrolman who's assigned to this beat, but they're on the last priority as far as the Boston police go, meaning if any patrolman is either ill, out injured, or vacationing, they pull the beat policeman off, and that means we see him maybe half the time.
If I tried to take the walking officers out of the areas that I have them, then I would have an entire community in an uproar, and I don't think that they'd stand for it.
Here with me in the studio is Hubert Williams, Director of Police of the City of Newark, New Jersey, Dr. George Kelling, Research Fellow at Harvard University, and Chris Lee Wood, Director of the Justice Resource Institute for Neighborhood Crime Prevention. Hubert Williams, the evidence seems to suggest that foot patrol doesn't bring down the crime rate, but it does make people feel safer. If it only makes them feel safer, aren't we lulling them into a false sense of security?
Well, I don't think so. First of all, none of the police strategies, nothing that we do has been shown in the research to actually reduce crime alone. And the important thing about making people feel safe is that we can get people to use the streets again. And if we can get people back in the streets, the public use of the street has been shown to be one of the things that deters crime. If people are on the streets, concerned about their fellow citizens, it's much less likely that the crime is going to be rampant in that area. So there's a lot of value to foot patrol, and I strongly support it.
Have you seen this happen in Newark, that people in areas served by foot patrol have begun to use the streets more?
Very definitely. Newark is one of the sites for the national fear reduction effort. And we had one area, South Orange Avenue, where young people in particular had virtually taken over the streets. People were extremely fearful because of the clustering of youth on corners and had become afraid to use the streets. By use of foot patrol and a mix of other police strategies, we were able to change that condition, to remove those things that provoked people to fear, and people began to use the streets again. As a result, and I can't say exclusively as a result, but I can say as a fact that crime in that area has gone down.
Now, foot patrol, as we saw it a few moments ago, involved officers walking through neighborhoods, but many people live in high-rise buildings, such as in public housing projects. Can foot patrol work in these neighborhoods?
Well, I can't think of anything more critical to the discharge of police obligation and responsibility in a high-rise complex than vertical patrol.
What do you mean by
vertical patrol? Means that the police officer will not merely walk around the outside of the building. He will walk up the stairways. He will walk on the floors. He will make his presence felt. The symbol of law in those buildings is a rarity, and when people see the police, they feel an awful lot better. We've had instances where police officers, because of that strategy, have been applauded when they've made arrests. And it really brings us back to the point where the people and the police are acting together in unison to deal with their mutual problem, crime and disorder in the community.
You mentioned a moment ago that many citizens are worried about gangs of youth hanging around on street corners. What do the police do to handle loiterers when they encounter them?
Well, all police departments have a variety of tactics and methods that are used. In Newark, we have a number of strategies. One is called selective area field enforcement, where we actually target these corners where the youth are hanging out there. And we use a tact of sending a motorized car around to tell them to leave because they're obstructing the passage on the sidewalks. When they refuse to leave, then there's a significant police presence brought into the area. We've learned after a period of use of this particular strategy that once the initial car goes around and tell people to leave, they automatically leave. So that police have become very innovative in getting these kids off the corners and off the streets. And there are a lot of strategies that are used, but basically police have found it necessary to make arrests and to let people know that they're not going to tolerate this kind of activity. It's sort of a tough, hard-nosed approach, but it's only necessary in the beginning. After that, people will move towards voluntary compliance.
Let me ask George Kelling a question to follow up on that. You've studied foot patrol in many parts of the country. What is it that the police do on foot patrol that tends to make citizens feel safer?
Well, I think the first thing is that foot patrol is is a felt presence. That is, that citizens recognize that there are police around, and the citizens feel that the police are there for them rather than just on their way something else. Secondly, what I noticed in Newark and have noticed in other cities, police become very much involved in order maintenance activities. That is, issues of drunks down, prostitutes, drug dealing, those kinds of street activities, while maybe not on the surface very threatening to individuals or maybe not even criminal events, nevertheless frighten people enormously. And what we found in Newark was that it was that fear of disorder that was really much more, citizens were much more afraid of disorder than they were of serious crime.
Citizens seem to like foot patrol. Police Director Williams approves of foot patrol, but if you look around the country, you find many police chiefs still very reluctant to institute foot patrol. Why the reluctance?
Well, I think we have to recall that many police departments abandon foot patrol. Almost all police departments abandon foot patrol for two reasons. First of all was to increase the amount of control they'd have over individual police officers. In the past in American policing, corruption was a very serious problem. When police officers are on foot, they work very intimately with communities, and on the one hand, that's a very good outcome. On the other hand, that can present problems. Problems of corruption, problems of unequal enforcement, that is, a minority member come into an all-white community. At times, police would work so closely with the community, they'd work on behalf of that community, keeping minorities out. And so there has been reluctance, I think, to give up on the part of police managers to give up that kind of control. Secondly, a conventional wisdom developed in policing. And that conventional wisdom, that preventive patrol in automobile and rapid response to calls for service, was effective in reducing crime. And that conventional wisdom has been a driving force in policing for many years, really since the 1930s and 1940s.
Do you think that's changing nationwide?
I think it is. I think that there has been such a public clamor for foot patrol. Not just foot patrol, I should say. A public clamor for a more intimate relationship between citizens and police. The remoteness that has been created as a result of police officers being almost exclusively in cars has been felt by citizens, and citizens want more contact with police officers, whether it's police officers getting out of their car and walking for periods of time, knocking on citizens' doors, walking foot patrol. Citizens simply want a stronger feeling of police presence.
Now, we've seen this in Boston and Newark, and we can imagine this happening in other big, older, crowded cities. But is foot patrol a realistic possibility in the newer, more spread out cities, Houston, San Diego, Los Angeles?
In many of these cities, police officers could walk for an hour and not really see many people because houses are so spread out and the construction of communities is such that the houses don't face the street. I think what we're essentially talking about when we talk about foot patrol is kind of a metaphor. And I think citizens almost see it that way. And it's a metaphor for wanting closer contacts with police officers. And there are other ways to do that. Police officers can go to community meetings. They can go to church meetings. They can visit businesses, shopping centers, knock on people's doors. People want contact with police. That's the primary thing. And if they have to use the car from going to place, it is still important that the central tendency to be out of the cars rather than in the cars.
One point that the Police Director Williams made about police handling juveniles on street corners. Now, in effect, he's telling his police officers, move them along, sweep the corners, get them off the streets. Now, is that really enforcing the law, or is that simply establishing a certain level of order that the community may want? What are the proper limits on a police officer's discretionary authority to engage in that sort of behavior?
Well, that's a very complicated issue, and it asks the question, first of all, you ask the question, what is the source of authority? And it's not just the law. It turns out that there are other sources of authority for social control in the community, and that is the neighborhood will, the neighborhood political will. And police officers enforce not only criminal law, but they enforce certain principles of order that are different from community to community.
Let me go on to Chris Lee Wood on that very point, because she represents an organization in Boston that has become deeply involved with trying to get the police and the community work more closely together. And everything we've heard so far leads me to believe that foot patrol is not something the police can do in isolation. It has to be an interactive process with the community. What are the community's responsibilities to make this work successfully?
First of all, the community has to be knowledgeable about what the potential and the limitations of foot patrol are. They also have to be committed to increase their awareness so that they are gathering information that can be passed on to the foot patrol officer so that he has the information he needs on trouble spots or trouble people to do his job correctly.
Have you found it difficult to create and sustain community interest in providing this kind of reciprocal relationship?
Any kind of community organizing is difficult to sustain. I think when there is a foot patrol officer involved, however, the group more easily sustains itself because it has this day-to-day interaction with the foot patrol officer. They see the foot patrol officer acting on their priorities, and this enables them to continue their own organizations and keep the circle going.
Now, you come from a city, Boston, that has very cold winters. Mm-hmm. And in a cold winter, I would think if I were a police officer, I wouldn't want to walk around the city in Fenway or Roslindale late at night with a temperature of 15 degrees above zero. Do you find that the police officers are willing to do this, or do you find that sometimes the police officers take refuge in warmer locations?
A lot of times what happens, and that's one of the big complaints, is that the police officers do not walk the neighborhoods where people live. Because of that, for one reason, they tend to hang out in businesses where they can get inside and be warm. I think a neighborhood group should offer to the police officer a refuge in various houses where he can have hot coffee, use a bathroom, just take some of the chill out, or they can help him locate an office that's within that community that he can be in and have a phone to talk to people over the phone when he's not actually patrolling.
If you were the chief of police, what kind of training or what kind of instructions would you give to your officers before you sent them out on foot patrol?
Well, first of all, if I was the chief of police, I would be dedicated to the spirit of foot patrol and pass that on to the men, make them know that they really are contributing an important part of policing, of preventative policing, and that they're not being put on foot patrol as punishment for something. I would give them training in community organizing so they could help to catalyze crime prevention groups in the neighborhoods where they're working. I would give them training in how to link people with resources, social service resources, to help prevent problems from getting to the point where they become criminal.
Do you think this has been done in your experience?
In my experience, no, it hasn't lived up to that potential. I think that it can live up to that potential. It just needs some more work.
If the police are to take this role of identifying a broad range of community problems, they really become less of a law enforcement official and more of a community social worker. And many police officers don't like to think of themselves as social workers. They join the force to be a cop. And you're suggesting that citizens might have complaints not so much about crime, but about dirty streets, or about broken windows in stores, or about street lights that are out. Is it realistic to expect that the police officer can play a role in delivering services from other community agencies?
I think it is realistic. I think, again, that they have to be told, and it has to be reinforced from the upper command, that that's an important job, that they're expected to do that. And but in addition, they also have other policing responsibilities, arresting criminals, they carry a weapon, all of that. And the community has to help them gather the information they need so that they can become the person who can put people through to the proper resources that they need.
Hubert Williams, you are police director in a city that's predominantly black, and George Kelling is from a city, Boston, that is largely white. And he mentioned the fact that in the past, police officers might work on behalf of a neighborhood of one ethnicity to help maintain its ethnic integrity against persons, let's say blacks, moving into a white neighborhood. Do you see this as a problem? Has this something you've had to deal with, to overcome, making sure the police officer was ethnically neutral in how they enforce their responsibilities while on the street?
Well, I really think that the issue depends largely on the department and the policies and the training and practices of that department. In the city of Newark, officers know that they have to treat everybody with a sense of fairness. Officers are not going to treat black citizens unequally as a rule. And they realize that this kind of behavior would not be tolerated by the department's management. So it's not really a major problem, but I think I know what George is talking about. An awful lot of police officers, in their own discretion, with their own authority, tend to carry with them the stereotypes that exist in the society at large. They see a black person walking in the streets in a predominantly white neighborhood, and he automatically becomes a suspect. He's treated differently than a white person would in that neighborhood. I don't think it really goes to the issue of foot patrol. It goes to the perceptions of the officer, his own prejudices, and the way the department treats that officer. These kind of things can be dealt with. One of the issues I would like to raise with respect to the question of foot patrol is resource-orientated. In the city of Newark, for example, we dispatch radio cars on approximately 250,000 calls for service a year. Now, if you talk to police tacticians and strategists about this, they would say that that's far too many calls and that you should use differential response strategies, handle some of those calls over the telephone, have people go into the precincts, reduce the number of actual instances in which you have to send out radio cars, and you'd have more manpower available. I think that that's one of the things police departments have to do, is use the resources differently, because if we did that, then we could have more time available to do other kind of things. Making people feel secure is critical, in my view, to having a quality of life in the community that's going to be acceptable. And foot patrol is a valuable tool to do that. So I think that we need to, I remember an experience in Newark, for example, years ago when I was coming up. The hospitals used to send doctors on every ambulance, interns. And then they stopped that practice, and they started, after about 10 years or so, to only send them in heart cases whenever there was a heart attack. Then they stopped that, and they instituted something called emergency centers in the hospital. Then people began to go to the hospitals for emergencies, and we no longer sent ambulances on those kind of things. In the medical profession, they used the resources differently. The public became educated, and as a result, a revolution has occurred. In policing, we need to do the same types of things.
Are you suggesting that we may come to the point where the police will no longer make house calls?
I'm suggesting very strongly that an awful lot of things that police officers do, police departments do, they do not need to do. They do not need to do those things in the manner that they do them. It's a waste of resources. And one of the reasons that they do that is because they face intense public criticism whenever they try to make those changes.
Let me ask George Kelling about that. You have looked at how the police are regarded in many communities. Does it affect the quality of police-community relations if police departments were to adopt Hubert Williams' strategy and stop sending a car for every call, no matter how minor? Does it make a difference?
Well, I think initially it will. I think I would just reflect just a moment on what Hubert said, in that it has to be remembered that rapid response to calls for service was a model that the police developed and essentially sold the public on this idea that it would have great benefits. The dilemma of police now is that they've managed to sell the citizens and sell politicians on the idea that rapid response to calls for service is a valuable service, when as a matter of fact it doesn't.
So wait a minute, when you're saying that the quicker the police respond to a call, that quickness has in itself no independent effect on whether the crime is solved or an arrest is made?
That's right. That's right. There's been research conducted over the last 10 years and about this issue, and one of the things that stands out, and that is that citizens delay a considerable period of time before they call the police. Now, there's several reasons for that. Citizens go into shock. A big reason is that so many citizens know the person that's victimized them, and they have to go through a decision as to whether they want to call the police or not. Generally, they call the police second. As a result, that takes somewhere between 20 to 40 minutes before the citizen called the police. Meantime, the police are organized to get there in 3 minutes. So the total amount of time is not the 3 minutes. The total amount of time is somewhere between 20 and 40 minutes. As a result, it simply has no practical value whatsoever for police departments. But to be able to do that, to be able to respond quickly to calls for service, it means you have to have enormous amounts of slack time for police officers. So enormous amount of slack time of police officers, so that when calls start lining up, you have a lot of police time to be able to rapidly respond. But what's also been discovered is that if you deal with citizens well on the telephone, if you counsel with them, if you advise them, if you give them options, citizens can be satisfied with a wide array of services other than a police car coming exactly at the moment the citizen calls.
Let me get back to Chrisley Woods for a moment. One of your responsibilities is to help develop community relationships with the police, but do you feel you also have a responsibility to help persuade the community how they need to support policing? For example, if foot patrol is expensive, and if the police still have to answer tens of thousands of calls, does this imply that we need more police officers? Does this imply that the community has to face the fact of higher taxes, more police officers? Is this part of your responsibility or the citizens' responsibility?
I think that it is, at least from the citizens' point of view, a lack of resources that doesn't allow everybody to have a foot patrol officer. Foot patrol in Boston has not lived up to its potential to the point where citizens would want to have their taxes raised to institute a citywide foot patrol program. I think what needs to be done is some key areas where foot patrol is realized, and then see how people feel about those areas. And I have been trying to encourage that, yes.
And do you see that with the institution of foot patrol, there's been any reduction in the ability of the citizen to get a squad car to come when there is an emergency?
No, I haven't heard that complaint at all.
Have you seen a problem with resources in Newark?
Oh, absolutely. Resources are a critical problem in all major urban cities with respect to policing. Well, let me make 2 points before I complete the answer on that question. One is, as a head of a police force, I have to say that there are areas and types of things in which the police response is very critical. Oftentimes, people will see a crime in progress. Someone will call the police quickly. The police getting there quickly is very important. I think that what George Kelling is looking at is a broad picture, and he's saying that basically, as a general rule, that's not true. But I want to make sure that it's understood that there are exceptions to that rule. Police chiefs throughout the country would want to make sure that everybody understands that there are exceptions to that rule. Secondly, with respect to the resource issue, you simply cannot have your cake and eat it too. You simply cannot respond to hundreds of thousands of calls if you have a limited number of radio cars. You have to have motorized units. One of the things that police officials have done to sort of find some middle ground is to use what we call war runs, or to stop the radio car and do walk-in rides. And that gives them the flexibility to make a manifest police presence in areas that they need it, and to be ready and available to respond rapidly to a call when it comes in.
Thank you for joining me in this discussion of Foot Patrol, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening. For Crime File, I'm James Wilson.
Funding for this program was provided by the National Institute of Justice. This program was produced by the Police Foundation, which is solely responsible for its content.